All right, one of the themes that we had last time was, I guess this deals with any application you're building, but specifically for your project, you should go beyond merely entering data and spitting it back out. You should be doing something to put it in a form that would be usable by the hypothetical users of your system. And that can mean a bunch of things, and we talked about those last time, but I think they bear repeating. That can include things such as being able to filter. So don't see everything in a particular table, but be able to filter based on some criteria. Be able to sort it in a certain way, in a certain manner. Be able to combine data from different sources. We gave the example last time of a course roster that took data from department, faculty, enrollment, course. I think that's all the entities that we involved, and put them together to make something that's useful, a course roster. So be very aware of that as you are developing your project. What you do doesn't have to be anything major, but think out of the box, think out of the standard, well, this is the code that was scaffolded. Scaffolding is the easy way to do things. And hey, I'm all for the easy way to do things. All right, but that shouldn't be where it ends. Think about adding functionality to your application, to your web application, that would increase the usability of it and increase the value that people would get from using it. So we're going to show another example of that. And that is in the Contoso database, and it relates to the listing of faculty members. So let me show you what I mean. We go and run that application. And we have a list of instructors. Notice there's an extra option that wasn't there. And I just closed it. I meant to make it smaller. There's an extra link here in addition to edit, details, delete. There's a select. And what that will do is that will show additional stuff about the instructor, or select rather, will show additional stuff about the instructor. In fact, it will show you the courses. Now they show all the courses up here as well, but when we click select, we see the courses that they have, and we see a little bit more information about them. The course number of the course, the title of the course, and the department it's in. And then finally, if we click select one more time, we see the students enrolled in that class, along with their grades. So this is adding something that increases the functionality of this. It's not just merely a list of instructors, but it's a list of instructors that we can look at their courses, and we can look at the students enrolled in those courses. So let's see how that's done. First thing I want to do is I want to look at the URL each time, because each time we're doing a post back, we're sending the code back to the page, or yeah, we're doing a post back in that sense. So we get here. Actually, that's the one I want. So let's look at the URL, and I'm going to put it in words so that we can take a closer look at it. The URL initially is this. HTTP localhost :7192/instructors. Notice there's nothing after instructors. So what that will do, by default is it will call the index inside the instructors folder, which is the listing. So that's what we get with this URL. We get just a straight up listing of all faculty members. If we click select, here's the URL. The /5. And we can probably guess what /5 represents. That represents the ID of the instructor that we selected. Because if you have the ID of the instructor that we're interested in, we can then do something like display all the courses taught by that instructor. Finally, when we click this to select a course, we get this. All right, where we have the faculty ID along with the course that we're interested in, and then we can get a list of courses. So this URL gives us a list of all courses. Because we have not specified that we want it narrowed down in any way. We haven't passed any additional information after the URL that indicates what we want to see. With this mode, we get, I should say, list of all instructors, not courses. This shows us a list of all instructors plus the courses for the selected instructor. And what do I mean by selected? The one that we click the select link next to. If we select one more time, if we select a course, we get a list of all instructors, all courses, and students for selected course. So this page kind of works in three modes. We're going to either see a list of all instructors, a list of all instructors plus the courses for the selected instructor, a list of all instructors, all the courses, all their courses, trying to make this grammatically correct. All courses for selected instructor, and all students for the selected course. So the page knows what mode it's in based on what is or is not on the query string. All right. So that's what we're going to do here, is see how that works. Now let's go and look at the instructor index. All right, and we're going to start with the code behind because that's what supplies the data. And we'll also look at the CSS HTML page as well. Okay, These are all on gets, all right? We do not have a form that we are submitting using a post method. We are clicking on links, all right? And we'll take a look at that link in a minute. But we are clicking on links, and that is going to use the get method to display the data. So when we initially load the page, what do? Instructor data equals new instructor index data. Well, that's a new one, right? Well, we look in the model. Instructor index data is the data that's going to be used to populate this page. And let's look at that. It contains instructors, courses, and enrollments. That corresponds to these three levels. So sometimes we're going to fill in those fields, sometimes we're not going to fill in those fields. So we start off by creating our new instructor index data object. We fill in the instructors portions of it by pulling from the database. All right, that's what context instructors means. We're including office assignment. We're including courses, and then include department. What that means is we're including a list of courses for that instructor. In other words, we're filling this in, the list of courses. We're filling in the office assignment. And we're filling in for each course also the department. So when we're done, we have one of these guys, one of these objects that contains a list of instructors. And we have filled in for that list of instructors the office assignment, the courses, and for the courses we fill in the department. So this is what we have after that first instruction. We have one of these that contains this filled in and also some of the details filled in as well. We're not touching the courses and enrollments yet. That will be for our selected instructor and course. And we create a list. If ID is null, what does that represent? That represents the first scenario up here. Let me rephrase that. If ID is not equal to null, that corresponds to the second and the third scenario. So if ID is not equal to null, then we have one of those scenarios where we want to see the courses for the selected instructor or the courses and the students for the selected instructor. But initially, first time load, ID is equal to null. So therefore we have this scenario. There's no ID on the query string. Here, ID on the query string. Here, there's also an ID on the query string. So We're not going to do this with the initial load. We then look to see if the course on the query string is null. How do I know this relates to the query string? Well, because it's part of the onGet. The onGet, we can optionally pass stuff on the query string, and we're passing the ID and we're passing the course ID optionally. So this scenario, there's also no course ID. No course ID on query string. And this is no course ID on query string. Oh, no, this one, there is a course ID on query string. Getting ahead of myself here. So initially, first time this loads, we do this and fill in this object, the list of instructors. And we fill in the courses that's part of this list and the office location that's part of this list. Okay, so that's what's filled in. This instructor data gets filled in with a list of all the instructors, and for each instructor, we filled in the course list and the office location list. So let's look on the CSS_HTML. CSS_HTML, we have all this. We have our headers for last name, first name. For each item in this instructor data, instructor list, we're going to output the name of the instructor. If it matches the one that was selected, then we're going to put selected row equals table success. We're going to apply a class to it. Let's forget about that for now. We'll come back and I'll show you that in a minute here. We're displaying the last name, the first name, the hire date. Where if it's not null, we're displaying the office location. And then for each course in item, so what is item? An item is an instructor in the instructor data object within the model. We are displaying for each course in the items, in other words, that instructor list course, we're outputting the title of the course. So what we get is this. Initial load, nothing on the query string. Get a list of all the instructors, and we get those courses for each instructor. None of those are highlighted because we haven't clicked on any yet. We haven't selected any of them yet. So all this comes from the instructors that are in that instructor index model. Now notice this link here. This link calls itself back. It calls instructors and it gives a /5. How is that link constructed? Right here. Calls itself back and it passes on the query string the value of the ID. So it'll do select slash, or it'll do instructors or index slash and the value of the ID for that instructor. Right down the line. It does it for the other ones as well, because of course we need to know what instructor we're dealing with if we're editing or deleting or viewing the details. But here we need to know the selected one so that we can display the courses for the selected one and we can highlight the selected one. Okay, so now we hit selected and let's see what happens. We still get the list of all the courses. I'm sorry, of all the instructors along with their courses. But notice that one is highlighted. And there's a list below that says courses taught by selected instructor. So what happens when that scenario happens? Well, we still fill in the instructor data in the instructor index data. We still fill in the instructors and fill in the assignment and the courses just like we did when the page originally loaded. But since ID is not null, we're setting the instructor ID to ID value, and we are looking at, we're selecting from, I know this gets a little confusing, we're selecting from, not from the database, because we already have a list of instructors we pulled from the database. That is in this instructor data variable, which is an instructor index data, which, as we mentioned, contains a list of instructors, a list of courses, and a list of enrollments. So if we selected a instructor, what it's going to do is it's going to find the instructor that matches the ID that we clicked on. Right, the ID on the query string. So it finds that one instructor, because only one instructor is going to match that ID. It finds that instructor, and it takes that instructor's courses, which, if you remember, we filled up here, and it assigns those courses to the instructor data's list of courses. So if we've clicked it on if we selected an instructor and clicked on the select link, we do this just like we did originally. We have in our instructor data object a list of instructors, a list of courses, and a list of enrollments. If, however, they've clicked on an ID, the select link that puts an ID on the query string, then we say, okay, let's take those instructors, that selected instructors, courses, and set this variable, courses, in the instructor index data object. So remember, the first time through, this got filled in. It is a list of instructors, but it's a list of instructors where the course list is also filled in and the office assignment object is also filled in. Now, if an instructor has been selected and there's an ID on the query string, we find the instructor that matches that ID, and we set this variable's list of courses to the courses that belong to the selected instructor. This finds the selected instructor. This assigns the courses in this instructor data variable that's this type to be that instructor's courses. So now the bottom line is, if we've selected an instructor, this and this get filled in. So we can use that in forming the page. So if there's something in there, in other words, if there's some courses in there, that means we must have clicked a selected, we must have clicked and selected an instructor. And therefore we can loop through those that were in that list and display those, including the department name, because the department information is also filled in as well. And also, by the way, since we've collected on one, we can look and make sure and see, well, the instructor ID for this instructor matches the instructor ID in the model. Therefore, we're setting the class of that table row to be selected row. That's why we see it as highlighted. That indicates that that was a row that was selected. This actually is a very clever way to do it, not to say that there wouldn't be other ways to do it. All right, very last step of this. We click on a course and get the enrollments. So we can sort of probably predict how this goes. If there's something in the query string for course ID, which there is in the third scenario, we save the course ID so that we can highlight it, just like we highlighted the instructor. We find in the instructor data, we don't have to go back to the database. This is a little bit of an efficiency thing. We can find in the instructor data's course list the specific course that we've selected. We then take and expand that to include the enrollments. So when we're done, that selected course has its enrollments filled in. Then for each enrollment, we go and we add we add that, including the student, and get the student information from those enrollments. And we set the instructor data's enrollments equal to those selected course enrollments. So essentially, we fill in the enrollments for that course, including the students for that course. And these instructions do that. So now, the final step of the process, these three things are filled in. And therefore, we can use them when we loop through and display all the enrollments for that student or that course that belongs to that instructor. This is a long way around, I realize, but this is a great piece of functionality. Would you have to do it this way? No, you would not. You could do this any number of different ways. This is just one of them. But this is another example of how we can manipulate those lists and pull in data and set lists in different objects and so on to produce something that gives us some usability instead of just a dump of data from the database. All right, I'm looking at the time. We have a little bit of time left. I'm going to preview what we're going to talk about next week. Next week, we're going to talk about model view controller model, the model view controller design pattern. The main difference between it and what we're using, which is more of a model view model, is that there's one model per view as opposed to one model per entity. All right, we'll cut it short today. We'll either see you in lab or we will see you next week.